This video is about how to apply textures in Gmax for export into Trainz, and I use a paint program, Paint Shop Pro, which I've had for goodness knows how long. This was actually, I think this might be the 2000, so it must be 20 years old. Anyway, it's a basic paint program which I'm used to, and I enjoy using it. I find it very straightforward. So let's to start this video, I'm going to show you how I use an image of the Liverpool Overhead Railway garter crest, which I think is that. You can see a little version of it here. Here we are. So I found this online, and I decided this would make it that's the best version. So it's just a photograph. Always be aware of the size of the photograph. So here's the size down here, 949 pixels by 919. We're going to change all of that, because the first thing that I did here was I removed all of the extraneous parts of the image, and then I cropped it back so it's just centered on the garter crest. So if I open, I think it was this one, yes, there we are. That's it. I had a couple of goes at it, and I got it down to this, and I darkened it, and I'm using various functions in Paint Shop Pro. You can use Photoshop will do the same. The paint program that you get free with Windows, GIMP, which I've got there, I use quite often. You can use it for that as well. But this is the version of the image which I decided I would use on the side of my Liverpool Overhead Railway carriages in Gmax. So let's close this one. So this is the one we're working on. And you can see, as I say, there's a lot of detail there, and it's quite a big image as far as Gmax and exporting into Trainz is concerned. I try to reduce those textures as much as possible, because they do can hit the graphics, and unless you've got a massive spec machine, I mean, most of us now are, I mean, mine's an i6, Pentium i6, and that's Pentium anymore, is it? Whatever it is, anyway, Intel i6. Okay, so what we need to do is, first of all, is to remember that there are two aspects which Gmax requires from a texture before you even import it, and that's, first of all, that the JPEG format is not suitable. You have to use the .tga target. So what you would do is you would save this as, or save as a copy of it, and you would go up and down until you find, there it is, True Vision Target TGA. That's what you need to have. So I'm just going to cancel that because I've already made this, so I'm not going to do it all again. Garter crest, is that it there? That might be it on 1A. Various attempts at getting the garter crest right. I think that's probably it. Let's have a look. It looks a bit dark. Oh no, I know what I've done. I've removed I noticed that the one in the Liverpool Museum, this red is actually just the side of the carriage. So what I did is I selected all of that red in there, plus the black, and I've converted it, copied it over, or replaced it with the colour for the side of the carriage. So you can see there, and actually you can see it's quite pixelated, and it's actually that the true size of this one is this big. The true size of this one, which I used on my model, is this. So substantially different size, much smaller. Also you can see that it's been compressed a bit there. This is a true circle around there, not the little dangly bit at the bottom. What's that, the tongue, I think they call that. But this has been compressed, and the reason for that is I've taken that image, first of all, as 726 by 806, but when I've finished mucking about with the colours, and I'm assuming that you know how to do that, to select, I mean, in Paint Shop Pro, for example, well, I need to give it a bit more tolerance than that because there's a bit of variety in that colour. There we are. I mean, that's the beginning of the selection process. It's a little bit more complex than that, but gives you an idea of how you select. I mean, if we go into this one, I think it would be a lot easier. No, it's still all very messy. So I'm not here to explain to you how to use a paint program. You just have to experiment and find your way around that, whichever one it is that you're using. So this is what so I got to this image, but it was the correct circle, but that's no good because it is if we just go back, come on, it's this one, not this one, it's this one. 726, right, where are we? Come on, play the game. 726 across here and 806 bits, or no, well, pixels, oh, for goodness sake, in each direction. Now, when we get to Trainz, it needs all the textures have to be basically, I'm not sure what the mathematical term is, but it's not multipliers of 2 and it's not multiples of 2, but you can go 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1028 and bigger if you want. So what I did is I reduced this, I skewed it, I squashed it this way, and I kept the width that way, so you can see here it is 256 by 256 and it's the full range of colours, 16 million colours. So it doesn't matter that it's squashed like that because we're going to change it when we come to Gmax. We're going to unsqueeze it, but you have to have all of your textures squeezed down like that. Let me open up another texture which I've used in my Liverpool Overhead Railway to give you an idea of just warning notice. Let's have a look at that. There we are, a little warning notice which when you zoom in really breaks up, really pixelates, but down to the size it's going to appear in Trainz it looks okay. But again, if we look at the size, it's that one it's picking up, so let's close the garter crest one. No, we don't want to change, and we close that one. So it's 128 this way and 64 that way, and I've almost counted out every pixel to make sure I've got it exactly right to get the nice spread there. That's actually about the size it appears in Trainz, although you can read it. And another one, let's have a look at another one in Trainz. It's going to go into Trainz, notice. Ha! There we are, spitting prohibited. That was up inside most of the carriages, I think in the first class as well, which is a bit not quite sure about that. And you can see here it's just 64 pixels by 32 pixels, but again it's in that range 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. That's what you need to do. So you can have them, I've discovered, you can have them as landscape or as portrait. They don't have to be square, but they do have to be multiple, you know, they do have to be within that range, whatever that range, the correct mathematical term is for that range. Let's have a look, see what else I've got here in the way of TGAs. See, there's a lot of JPEGs and bitmap file, BMP files, but let's have a look. Carriage 39 TGA. So this is a square one. That's one that I use for the carriages. So first of all, I've got the number that goes on the front. I've got the background colour, which I use quite a bit of. I forget what I use that for. There's some squares of colours or textures there, and this one happens to be 256 by 256, and this, as I recall, gets repeated. Can't think where in the carriage, but I know it's important. What else? Another texture to give you an idea. So you can start off with anything. I mean, frankly, you can start off with any picture you like. Let's have a look. Museum interior, motor car side from Mike Edge. Really helpful, brilliant, real helpful stuff. Okay, let's have a look at the Liverpool Overhead Railway poster. Now you could use this as a texture if you wanted to. It's not the right size at the moment, 602 by 944, rather big, but supposing you wanted to put this up inside, you know, on the wall of one of your stations or even on the wall of the overhead. So this I downloaded from online, and picked it up online, I think. So now what I'm going to do is this is my resize option, and it says there, look, width 256, 256. So I've got that set already. I don't want to maintain the aspect ratio because I want it to come out of that, not to be just half of those numbers. And if we click on OK, whoa, really squashed. Well, that doesn't matter, because when we do it in Gmax, it'll be on a shape which is the correct poster shape, and we just paint it onto that. I'll not save that. One more TGA to have a look at. Let's have a look, see what else we got down here. So the carriages, lead roof, LOR banner. What's that? Oh yeah, that's one that I used. It's the lettering with the background colour, and basically I put a flat one-dimensional plane, or two-dimensional plane, two-dimensional plane, no depth, on the top of the side of the carriage above the windows, 3 of them, and pasted those on. And again, 1024, see that in the magic number, and 256, 16 million. So that's what Trainz demands. And if we have a look, if we go into Trainz, and let's have a look at the project I'm working on at the moment, which is Pierhead Station, which is an enormous project, or is enormous like many others. Now, not everything is being shown here because I'm still working on this model, but you can see it's quite a beauty. The platforms are missing at the moment, the tracks in between, the viaduct, but you can see there that's quite a, if you look at the number of polys, 20,000 polys. So I'm going to have to break it up when I export it into Trainz. And I'm just starting to do on this here. This is where the stairs come up. So there we are. You can just about see down there. That's where the stairs come up to the platform. This is a girder I'm working on at the moment, and platform sits. Oh, let's show you the platforms as well. Station platforms. There we are. So that's it with the platforms in, and the next piece along here, I've got to tidy that up a bit, lose those gaps, and that'll be the ticket office. Will go in there. I've got to make that, and then put some benches along here as well. Getting information about Pierhead Station is really difficult. There's no dimensions, no scale plan anywhere. Anyway, textures. What about textures? Well, let's have a look at the textures which I'm using. So for example, there's a lot of wooden framing there, and I use a standard text. So this is in Gmax. This is the material navigator. You need to have this. I tend to turn off Max, and these are all the textures I'm using. You see there's multiples there, viaduct textures, where I've merged different models together, and they've just carried that in, but it'll actually only be one viaduct texture that will get exported. And I've got canopy, glass, lead roof. Let's have a look at, well, I don't know, ticket window. Let's have a look at that one. So if I double click on it, it'll open up the material editor, ticket window. So that's the one that I'm using at the moment. And ticket window 2, so if we go back to my list of TGAs down here in the folder, which is where I'm using them, ticket window without spelt wrong, and I'll just double click on that, and that's the ticket window that I'm using. 256 by 256, and it gives me a ticket window, and it gives me a door with the word private on it, and it's been squashed. You can see it's not the correct proportions, but it does have 256 by 256. Okay, so that's in there. And the way I created that, or the way I made it available into Trainz, into Gmax rather, is, well, first of all, what you need to do, material editor. Let's make a new material. I always use standard. I never use this multi-material option. And let's call it, give it a name. We'll call it test, just so I know not to keep it. So I don't want to make a mess of this. And I want to make sure it's visible. That's whether it's visible or not. All the rest you can forget, pretty much. Maps. It's the diffuse color map. So click on that because I'm going to tell it which map to use. I'll tell it to use a bitmap. Okay, and now it puts me up and says, right, now where is this bitmap? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a non-standard shaped sized bitmap. I'm not going to use a TGA even. What I'll do is I'll use a photograph that I took off the net just to have a look at, just to see if it was suitable for the controls for the motor cars. Okay, so open. So it's, if we look down here, we'll see where it is. It's 640 by 480, completely unusable for inside Trainz. I'd have to change that. It's also a JPEG, which you don't use. But I'll just open it. It doesn't matter. It's just a test. Here it is listed, a test. And so let's make a shape. There we are, a plane. Okay, and let's give it test. There it is, with all the controls. Now supposing I did actually want to have a plane with this photograph on it as, say, part of a cab interior. It's obviously far too big. I'm just doing this just to show it. So if we wanted to make sure the plane was the correct size, let's just make that as 62. Okay, let's make it 6 foot by 3 foot. Now the key thing here I've found is that you have to be aware about proportions. So if the photograph or the texture itself is 2 by 1 proportion, then what you're pasting it onto basically should be something like 2 by 1. Otherwise it just distorts the image, and it doesn't look right. So you've got to be aware of that. But also, you remember our poster, if the texture, the TGA file, that's just got 4, let's just take that down to 1. The TGA file, if it's like the poster, it's been squashed, and let's assume that this has been squashed, and in fact it should be square, so let's just make it square. So we make it 5 foot by 5 foot. Then it restores the correct proportions of the texture, the photograph, whatever you've used as a texture. So even though the TGA file, which is complying to that 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, etc, 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 on each of its dimensions, width and depth, doesn't matter if you squashed out, by doing that you squash the original proportion of the texture. You can restore that original proportion by pasting the 256 by 256 texture onto a different proportioned mesh. So for example, if this should be 6 foot high, then that restores the original proportion of the original image. But you have to go through the 256 256 or 64 64 or 32 32, whatever, in order to get it into Trainz. So I hope that's been of help about textures. Making them is largely down to your own ability to use a photographic photo manipulation program like Photoshop, Paint Shop Pro, GIMP, any sort of photo and program. And believe me, I am no expert, far from it, very very incompetent as far as that's concerned. I mean, if we look here at the texture that I use for most of this, I'm actually using what the station texture produces most of this. And if we were to look at the station texture, well, first of all, let's find out which one it is. Station texture 2, there are several that I'm using. There it is, and I load it as a TGA file. And then here, this is basically all I've done is these are solid colors or grays or whatever. This is a bit of a mottled gray, which what I do is I produce a uniform gray, and then I add noise effects, noise, add, So if you look at the window here, it's actually adds, that's before and after, it speckles it completely, which I would do for just that section. I'd limit it to that section using my selection tool, and I would put that on a separate back layer, and then I would convert it to grayscale and blur it and distort it a little bit, and then that gives me this random pattern across there, which is really quite useful at times. Sometimes it's not, but that random pattern there is actually the roof. And if we look here, there's the roof, that great long roof with smears basically, which is okay, it looks fine. So if we select the roof and we have a look at the way in which I've used the texture on the roof, there it is. I've actually, if I just select the single face of the roof, the outer part, there it is. So I've smeared that. I've not repeated it or anything, I've just smeared that space there, that texture there, right across that length of roof. And it is also on this bit of roof here. Well, that's all grouped up, so I don't want to ungroup that. To show you, it's just so many groups and complications with this. But on this roof here, that's another group. But there, on all of these, I've just realised I've got to extend these roofs into the canopy roof that's going to be over the platforms. I mean, if you want to see there we are, that's where I am with this. Those are all the attachment points for the passengers. That's for the track, station track, and this one is in the wrong place at the moment, but that's where the viaduct is going to be attached. Those are spares from a previous station, as are those. Those are the ticket offices, which I'm going to hack about to bring in here. So that's the way I use a texture in Gmax. And when it exports, sometimes it's awful and you have to go back and do it again, which could mean making a much bigger texture. The bigger the texture, the more detail, the more impact you get, the more well, it's just a better image all round. Just noticed a gap there, I'm going to fill up as well. Oh well, there you are. So this is very much work in progress, but I hope it does give you an idea of how I use textures. If you've got any specific questions about it, please do post them on YouTube, and I will try and answer them to the best of my ability. As I say, I'm no expert, far from it. This is just all learning on the fly, learning as I go. But you can see, you can create some really lovely images. I love these sort of stations, these old Victorian, especially the later 19th century stations. They're so ornate. This will be a real gem on our Liverpool overhead railway route. There's a couple of others. There's one at Herculaneum still to do, and there's one at Seaforth Sands to do, which is similar to this, and maybe another variant of this for use elsewhere along the line. So textures, the key things to remember about textures is that they must be TGA files, and they must be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. on their pixels, width and depth. But otherwise you could use any image you like. So I'm going to eliminate test because I don't want it. But frankly, I could have used any photograph. I mean, I was debating whether to use a picture I took just yesterday of one of our clematis plants out in flower and paste that across the whole of the roof here just to show you. But I don't think I need to do that. But I hope that gives you an idea of the way in which I use textures and the way they can be used. You can be very flexible with them. I mean, this is only 256 by 256, and along here, for example, if I wanted to have boarding, vertical boarding all the way along, I could just stretch put this onto the whole roof. Well, why not do it? Let's just do it. I'll show you. So there's a roof. Let's select the face. There it is at the moment. Well, let's be silly. let's take this up to here. Well, and immediately you see you've got all sorts of fun and games. Let's make sure that that is right at the top. I'm going to move that up carefully to there. And let's make sure that that's at 0, so it's right over on the left hand side. And let's have a look at the roof to see what that's done to the roof. It's made a mess of it. Look at that. Make sure we've got texture correction on now. I can't turn it on at the moment. So it's clearly a major mess. So if we were to take this and to stretch it out, so that would be 1 to there. Okay, so if we put it to 1, there we are, it moves it to the right hand edge. Well, let's do 2. Let's repeat it, and we can do that because it's as if it's wrapping around the texture. And if we zoom out a bit, there we are, you can see that that's out there, but it's as if it's repeating, and they're all getting close together. So that's 2 times, so let's say 4 times. There we are, there's more of them. Let's do 10 times. And zoom in a bit. And you can see you've got some really, now unfortunately at the moment, for some reason, it's not letting me right click. Sometimes happens, so I have to reboot, and, you know, the joys of Gmax. Anyway, but you can see there's lots and lots and lots, because I've used it way out there. Just repeating. And that's a really handy way of using textures. But you have to think about how your texture should be designed. So I knew I would be wanting to do that sort of thing, lots of vertical boarding. So I made sure these were from the left and the left. If I took that, if we take that down to 1 again, and if I, instead of having it all the way from side to side, which is the way I wanted to extend it, I had it down here, and I thought, well, I can just increase that and increase that. Well, you can't, because you got you know, image there. And if I thought, oh well, what I'll do is I'll move it to the right so that it just wrap round, don't work. Because essentially what you're doing is you've got to imagine this texture duplicated here, which means you're going to get this bit over there. I'll show you. There you are. My advice is really play around with the textures, and you'll become more and more competent with them. So there we are. As I say, any direct questions about using textures in Gmax, please do post a query as been done in the past, and do comment on the video as well, please do, and any questions, and give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe, because it's only by having subscribers that I know that there's anybody out there who's remotely interested. It's a great thing, Gmax, Trainz, a little world all of our own.